Ladies and gentlemen, out in the untamed stretch of the Wild West, where the sun burned the earth gold and the wind carried stories older than any man, there came a moment that stopped a hardened cowboy in his tracks. He wasn't looking for trouble, nor for wonder, just riding along the riverbank as he'd done 1,000 times before. But fate has a strange way of picking its hour, and on that day, it chose him. For there, by the glimmering water, stood an Apache woman, quiet, graceful, and unaware of the eyes upon her. She was washing by the river, her presence as natural as the flowing current itself. Yet it wasn't her beauty alone that made him rein in his horse. It was the sight of her torn dress, worn with struggle, a silent cry carved into fabric. And in that instant, the cowboy felt something shift inside him. A question, a warning, a call to destiny. This, my friends, is the story of what happens when two worlds collide in the unforgiving frontier, where danger rides close, secrets run deep, and courage is the only true currency a person's got. Welcome to a tale shaped by dust, fate, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. The cowboy had ridden that trail so many times, he could have followed it blindfolded. But on this particular morning, the air felt different, heavier somehow, as if the land itself was holding its breath. His horse moved at an easy pace along the riverbank, hooves sinking softly into the damp earth, while the distant call of a hawk echoed across the sky. He wasn't searching for anything but quiet, the kind a man needs after too many days of dust, danger, and long unspoken thoughts. Yet, destiny rarely asks permission before it steps into a man's path. As he rounded a bend in the river, sunlight caught the water like scattered gold, and that's when he saw her. At first, she was just a figure by the river, bowed slightly as the current swirled around her hands. Her long dark hair framed her like a shadow against the bright morning, and her presence blended so naturally with the land that he almost missed her entirely. But then she shifted, and the light caught her in such a way that he could see the weariness in her posture, the tension in her movements. Something inside him tightened, though he couldn't explain why. This wasn't a woman gathering water for her people or washing from a long journey. Something about her felt different, fragile, though she stood like someone carved from the earth itself. He reined in his horse without thinking, the leather creaking softly as instinct rooted him in place. The river whispered, birds scattered overhead, yet all he could focus on was the stillness that surrounded her. She was Apache. He could tell that much from the braids woven into her hair and the patterns faintly visible on the fabric she wore. In another time, another place, the sight alone might have sent a cowboy riding in the opposite direction, wary of the unspoken tensions between their worlds. But that didn't cross his mind, not with the unease crawling up his spine and urging him to look closer. It wasn't curiosity that anchored him there. It was something deeper, something in the way her shoulders sagged between breaths, something in the faint tremble of her hands, something that told him she wasn't there by choice, nor by chance. This moment, quiet, simple, and yet strangely heavy, felt like the opening of a door he hadn't meant to approach. A door fate had placed directly in his path. And as he watched her by the river, unaware of his presence, he understood one thing clearly. Whatever had brought her there was about to pull him in too, whether he was ready or not. The torn dress was the first thing that struck him, not because of what it revealed, but because of what it implied. Fabric doesn't rip like that from a simple fall or a careless snag on a branch. Those jagged tears told a story, one written in haste, fear, and struggle. As the breeze lifted the edges, he could see how uneven the rips were. Some pulled so hard the threads curled outward, like they'd been wrenched by desperate hands. It was the kind of damage a woman would never ignore unless she had far bigger worries pressing on her shoulders. And the cowboy, hardened as he was by the frontier, felt a rare surge of anger rise in his chest, an anger reserved for injustices that had no place, even in a land as wild as this. She moved slowly, as though each motion weighed more than it should. The torn dress clung to her like a reminder of whatever she'd endured, something she was trying to wash away with river water that could only do so much. Every so often, she'd glance over her shoulder, the sharp twitch of someone who had been running, hiding, or surviving. Fear wasn't visible on her face, not exactly. Apache women were known for their strength. But fear leaves traces in other ways. The stiffness in the spine, the pauses between breaths, the constant awareness of the world behind you. The cowboy recognized those signs instantly. He'd worn them himself in darker times. What gripped him most wasn't the damage itself, but the silence it carried. Torn clothes on this frontier were rarely from accidents. They pointed to conflict, bandits, scouts, renegades, or worse. Something or someone had caused that damage, and whoever it was might still be out there, watching the same riverbank. The thought tightened his grip on the reins, his instincts sharpening like a blade being pulled from its sheath. Trouble wasn't just near. It had already brushed her, maybe hunted her, maybe still hunting. The cowboy knew he shouldn't get involved. Not yet, not without understanding what line he'd be crossing. But the dress made that choice harder. Torn fabric can be mended, but the story behind those tears often can't. And as he watched her try to rinse away the dirt of a struggle she didn't choose, he realized he was standing on the edge of something unforgiving. The river kept moving, indifferent and eternal, but he remained frozen, caught between riding on and stepping into a mystery that had already gripped him by the heart. There was a quiet moment where the cowboy felt the weight of a decision he hadn't even made yet. A moment where his sense of duty rose not from logic, but from something instinctive, something tethered to the core of who he was. As he watched her, still unaware of his presence, a silent plea seemed to hang in the air between them. She hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked in his direction, yet the story carried in her posture, her torn dress, and the way she kept glancing toward the tree line, told him more than words ever could. She needed help. Not the kind that could be asked for, not openly, not in a world where trust between their people was fragile as dry twigs. But the need was there, buried in every cautious movement she made. He felt a knot form in his chest, the kind he only felt when something just wasn't right. The frontier had a way of numbing men, turning compassion into something to be tucked away for safer times. But some situations punched straight through that armor. And as he took in the way her hands shook slightly each time she lowered them into the water, he felt that punch in full force. She was trying to stay strong, trying to remain composed, but even strength has limits when danger lurks close by. He knew that look. He'd seen it on settlers who'd lost everything, on travelers who'd stumbled out of the desert half dead, on men who'd fought for their lives and barely crawled back. His horse shifted beneath him, sensing the tension threading through his body. He placed a slow hand on its neck, steadying them both. There was a pull inside him. Subtle at first, then tightening like a rope around his conscience. He didn't know her name, her tribe's story, or what trouble had torn at her clothes. But he knew suffering when he saw it. And he knew danger didn't leave wounds without reason. Still, he hesitated. Helping her meant stepping into a conflict that wasn't his. It meant risking trouble from her people, from his own, and from whatever threat had chased her to the river. But turning away felt impossible. Every part of him rebelled at the thought of riding on and leaving her to fate. Something about her silence, her endurance, her unspoken fear pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain. He hadn't chosen this crossroads, but he was standing in the middle of it all the same. And deep down, he already sensed which direction he was going to take, even if he hadn't admitted it to himself yet. The air between them carried more than just the scent of river water and pine. It carried the unspoken tension of two worlds that had spent years circling each other in mistrust. The cowboy knew enough about the frontier to understand that every encounter between settlers and Apache could tip either toward uneasy peace or sudden danger, depending on the slightest shift in tone, movement, or intent. Yet as he watched her from the saddle, he felt none of the hostility he'd been warned about since he was young. Instead, he felt the fragile thread of something human, something raw and real, tugging at both sides of that divide. She wasn't a threat, not in this moment. She was a woman alone, wounded in ways the river couldn't wash away, and he was a man caught between caution and compassion. Still, the history between their people pressed down like a weight on the cowboy's shoulders. He had heard stories told in saloons, whispered on cattle drives, and carved into campfire tales. Stories of raids, losses, revenge, and misunderstandings that had left scars on both sides. And she, in her quiet struggle, carried centuries of her own people's pain and pride. Even the way she stood, shoulders squared despite her exhaustion, spoke of a heritage built on resilience. Approaching her couldn't be done lightly. One wrong gesture could mean danger. One misplaced word could ignite suspicion instead of trust. But he also knew that humanity often mattered more than history. He'd seen Apache braves show mercy where he'd expected fury, and he'd seen white men show cruelty where he'd expected restraint. People were unpredictable. The land shaped them differently, and survival didn't always follow the rules of tribe or creed. As he studied her trembling hands, he realized the line between their worlds wasn't a wall. It was a boundary drawn by fear, misunderstanding, and long-held wounds. But standing there, watching her alone against whatever had harmed her, that boundary felt thinner than ever. He found himself wrestling with questions he didn't have answers for. Would she see him as a savior or as another threat? Would his presence frighten her more than the danger already stalking her? And if he rode away, telling himself it wasn't his place to interfere, could he live with the image of her fragile strength haunting him afterward? The truth was simple, even if the situation wasn't. Something in him refused to let the old divisions decide the fate of this moment. Two worlds might have been set against each other, but right now, right here by the riverbank, they were simply two people caught in the same unforgiving land. And the choice before him could bridge that divide or widen it forever. Danger in the frontier, rarely announced itself with noise. More often, it crept in quietly, through broken branches, bent grass, a shift in the wind, a feeling in a man's bones he couldn't quite name. As the cowboy watched the Apache woman by the river, that feeling settled over him like a shadow. It wasn't imagination or nerves. It was instinct sharpened by years of surviving a land that tolerated no fools. Something was off. Too quiet, too still. Even the river seemed to hush, as if listening for footsteps that hadn't yet surfaced. The woman knew it too. He could see it in the way she paused between movements, her head lifting ever so slightly, her eyes scanning the tree line without turning her body. She moved like someone who'd been hunted recently, someone who expected danger to return at any moment. And the more he watched, the more he felt certain she wasn't alone in her suffering. Whatever had torn her dress hadn't been a one-time encounter. It was part of a chase, a conflict still unfolding somewhere beyond their sight. The cowboy's hand drifted toward the butt of his revolver on pure reflex. He didn't draw it, not yet, but he rested his fingers there, ready. His horse shifted beneath him, ears flicking toward the forest in short, anxious movements. Animals sensed things quicker than humans, and the cowboy trusted his horse's instincts as much as his own. Something, or someone, was close. He scanned the ridge above the river, searching for movement, a glint of metal, or the faint shimmer of someone hiding in the brush. Nothing showed, but the feeling didn't fade. It grew. The land around them felt charged, like the moment before lightning cracks across the sky. The cowboy knew this sensation too well. The edge of a conflict about to break open. Thoughts raced through his mind. If he approached her now, would he draw whoever was stalking her out of the shadows? If he stayed hidden, would she remain an easier target? If he turned away, he'd escape danger, but leave her in its path. Each option held risk, but the stakes rose with every breath. He thought about what might be coming. Bandits roaming for captives, renegades seeking revenge, outlaws who didn't care whom they hurt. Any of them could have been responsible for her torn clothes and terrified glances. Any of them could be lurking feet away right now. The cowboy felt the moment tighten like a snare. He wasn't just deciding whether to help her. He was preparing to face whatever threat was closing in. And he knew, deep down, that once he stepped into her fight, there'd be no turning back. The river, the quiet, the distance between their worlds, none of it mattered now. The frontier had chosen its hour, and danger was already pulling them both toward the same inevitable collision. The moment by the river felt small on the surface, just a cowboy watching a woman who hadn't yet noticed him. But something in the depth of it told him life was shifting beneath his feet. In the Wild West, change often arrived like a storm, sudden, violent, and unstoppable. But sometimes it came like this, in a quiet breath, in the stillness, before two lives touched for the first time. As he sat in the saddle, caught between caution and calling, he sensed that what he chose next wouldn't just decide her fate. It would alter his own path in ways he couldn't yet see. He wasn't a man prone to soft feelings or sudden attachments. The frontier carved that out of most men long before they ever reached his age. Yet something about her resilience despite exhaustion, the way she held herself with dignity even in torn clothing, the silent courage she wore like armor, stirred something inside him he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just sympathy, it was recognition. a sense that her struggle echoed battles he'd fought in his own life, battles that left their own invisible tears and scars. He realized that this wasn't merely chance. It felt like fate crossing their paths with deliberate hands. He'd survived gunfights, storms, and betrayals, but never had he felt a pull quite like this, an instinct that told him he was meant to stand between her and whatever hunted her. She didn't know him, didn't trust him, might even fear him if he stepped too close. Yet none of that dimmed the feeling that their destinies had collided, woven together by forces neither of them controlled. As he watched her lift her face toward the wind, searching for sounds only she could hear, he imagined a future that stretched far beyond this riverbank. A future where his choices would either protect her or abandon her to danger. And though he wasn't a man given to imagining futures, something about this moment refused to let him ignore the direction it was pointing. This wasn't merely a woman in trouble. It was a turning point. He knew that if he rode away now, the memory of her would follow him across every mile of desert and prairie. Her torn dress, the fear she tried to hide, the strength she refused to surrender. These images would become ghosts shadowing his conscience. And he knew, with every beat of his steadying heart, that he wasn't the kind of man who could live with ghosts. Standing still was no longer an option. Fate had already chosen the road, and as he tightened his grip on the reins, he accepted that whatever came next, danger, conflict, or redemption, was a journey they were about to face together, whether either of them was ready or not. As we reach the end of this tale, one truth rises above the dust: danger and silence of the frontier. Sometimes, destiny comes not with thunder, but with a quiet moment by a river, where two strangers' lives change forever. The cowboy who set out that morning seeking nothing but peace found instead a calling he could not ignore. And the Apache woman, wounded yet unbroken, carried a strength that even torn fabric could not hide. Together, their worlds, divided by fear, history, and distance, were drawn toward one another by circumstance, courage, and the undeniable pull of fate. This story reminds us that the Wild West was more than guns and grit. It was a land where humanity still fought to survive in the cracks between conflict. It shows how a single act of compassion can rewrite the ending of a life, how a moment of courage can bridge the greatest divides, and how choosing to help rather than turn away can shape destinies far beyond what the eye can see. In the end, the cowboy's greatest decision wasn't whether to face the danger stalking the riverbank. It was choosing to listen to the calling inside him, the part that refused to let injustice stand, the part that recognized pain in another soul, the part that understood that some moments are not meant to be passed by. And for the Apache woman, the moment he stepped toward her was more than rescue. It was the beginning of a bond forged in survival and sealed in trust. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember this. In every life, there comes a moment when you must decide whether to ride on or to stand up, whether to follow fear or to follow honor. The cowboy chose honor, and in doing so, changed more than one life. He changed his own. And like the river that witnessed their meeting, their story flows on, carrying with it the reminder that courage, compassion, and fate often meet in the most unexpected of places.